Welcome to Talking Giants, presented by SeatGeek. I'm your host, Bobby Skin, here with my co-host. Well, actually, not here. I guess I used to do it. Got an interview with Jordan Raanan, 55 minutes. Talked about everything. Start a lot on this Brian Wink Martindale stuff, where it's headed. Daniel Jones, Evan Neal, basically hit all the big topics that you'd want to hit at the bye week. So, a good conversation with him. We'll get right into it. Won't waste any time. First, today's episode is sponsored by Shady Rays. This is the season of giving people Shady Rays. Get the perfect gift for a special someone, yourself, or both. Our friends at Shady Rays have you covered with premium polarized shades and quick swap snow goggles that won't break the bank. That's huge, right? Like, it's good. They look good, great price. And say, well, what's got to be something wrong with them, right? Like, if you lose them, you're screwed. Wrong. We'll get there. Shady Rays is an independent sunglasses company that offers an unrivaled product that's just as good as any expensive pair we've worn. Durable frames and world-class optics for all outdoor adventures. And if you're into winter sports, their quick swap snow lenses move effortlessly between full sun to low light environments. That's not all. Shady Rays offers the most insane protection in all of eyewear. Here it is. Every pair of sunglasses is backed by lost and broken replacements. That's huge. That's huge for me. I don't like to buy nice sunglasses because of that. Well, guess what? Shady Rays has changed my life. I could finally have good sunglasses. If you lose or break your pair, even on day one, an A1 from day one, they will send you a brand new pair. No questions asked. No preguntas. Wear your Shady Rays with confidence because they have your back long after your purchase. Shady Rays is currently in their biggest sale of the year for Black Friday. Don't miss out on the best deals for shades, snow goggles, and prescription sunglasses. Go to shadyrays.com and try for yourself the shades rated 5 stars by over 250,000 people. You'll be glad you did. And here's Jordan Raanan. All right, we usually do our interview bye week, the Monday after the bye. We can start off with that, but it seems like there's a lot going on in Giants land. So we have Jordan Raanan on of ESPN. First, welcome on the show. I want to dive right into it, though. Like, I don't even want to bullshit around. Is
Okay.
Wink Martindale the Giants' defensive coordinator in 2024?
Oof. Look, you want to go against what Jay Glazer says? Jay Glazer is usually pretty plugged in. Now, I will admit, I had heard some things. You hear some rumblings, but there's plenty of people who don't like each other in this business or don't get along great or have opposing really philosophies and way how they handle themselves. But I did not know it had reached a point where it might not, where it might blow up on them. I thought they would still be able to continue, and I still do. I still do think there is a chance they continue. I'm not sure if I want to bet on it right now, though. I'll be honest with you on that. Clearly, there's a difference in opinion between the two coaches. We're talking about Wink and Brian Daboll here. Everything about them seems diametrically opposed, right? Just the way they handle themselves on the sideline, the way they handle themselves in public, everything about them. But I thought it could work. I'm not so sure. Where would you bet right now?
I mean, Jay Glazer says they might not get through the season. I would be shocked if he is the defensive coordinator at this point. Like, when
Yeah.
Jay Glazer is the one person in this entire business where I don't even question what he's saying. I do think this is coming from the Wink Martindale camp within all of this. To Glazer, I don't know how it got there, but it did get there, and it's factual. And Wink Martindale, it seems, kind of despises Brian Daboll, despite the game ball stuff, despite the blast pizza comments and the Pat Hamlin
Well, let's
PR
talk
job
about
on
the
this.
game ball stuff for a second. Just think about it. They don't get along. We pretty much know that. They don't like each other
Yeah,
so
it's
much,
it's a
right?
fact.
So
It's a
what do
hundred
you
percent fact.
so what do you think that look if you're Wink Martindale, let's pretend you're Wink Martindale, Bobby. You hate my guts. I hate your guts. I'm getting in front of everybody. I'm going to put on a show and be like, "Here you go, Bobby. Here's a game ball." How do you think that would be received? How would you receive that if someone you guys don't like each other, but when the camera's on in front of you, you're going to be like, "Hey, here you go, buddy. Game ball. Good job."
Oh, I'd want to throw it right back at him.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's obviously Dable's trying to protect. Now, I don't know if it's like a full on, like I don't know. I'm not going to say Daboll like did that with like bad intentions to like kind of throw one at him. But at the very worst, he's just doing it for PR to try and clean this up. And like we know that they are taking this seriously, despite the fact that Joe Shane pretended he didn't hear the report in his
How
press
ridiculous is
conference.
that? How
Yeah,
silly is that?
yeah,
What are we doing here?
obviously very silly. And I want to talk about him and a little bit too. I mean, what? Okay, but hey, there's been plenty of guys who have different personalities, and yeah, you can rub each other the wrong way sometimes. But to where this is like not fixable according to what Glade. I mean, I guess it's somewhat fixable, but right now it looks like it's just done. What
Let me give you a
started
path
this
to be
and what has
fixed.
accelerated it?
Okay, we'll get to that in a second. Let me give you a path to it being fixed first. John Mara is the mediator here, right? That's his job. He's going to go there. This is my opinion. After the season, this is kind of what he does in the draft room, right? If there's two differences of opinions, he sort of serves as the middleman. He's going to go to these guys because I think John Mara and company are going to want to keep Wink Martindale. It makes sense for the Giants for these two men to sit down and work it out, right? Because you don't want to have to start over. This is a big year three. They have to show progress in year three. To start over on defense after you've gotten the personnel basically to bring in for Wink is counterproductive for the Giants building something here. So I think after the season, if they make it that far, which I think they will, they'll sit down and John Mara will try and mediate it and make it work and see if it can work.
Yeah, but I mean, if well, here's the thing: Wink is under contract, right? So Daboll can essentially just keep him. Even if it's not the best relationship, and can try it
But if he
again. But then
doesn't want to stay,
I
you
feel like
just do an amicable parting of ways, right?
sure,
If
but
he
Daboll didn't
really
want to
wants to.
stay in Buffalo, and he was kind of. I mean, Daboll wanted to come coach under Judge. It'd be interesting to see, and then now you start to look at it, and like, is Daboll the issue? Like I'm intrigued. Like this is what I'm paying attention to the most for the rest of the season. Is this what started
Okay.
this and what has accelerated it? Because it
I
didn't
think,
start with Xavier McKinney.
yeah, no, I think that kind of was sort of the breaking point. But I think before that, just the fact that the way these two guys approach everything, I think that's the difference, right? You see Brian Daboll on the sideline, he's flipping tablets, throwing headsets, yelling at players. Wink Martindale is the exact opposite. If you go back, there was a point, I don't know exactly when, but last year, somebody asked him about being, cool and confident on the sideline. He talked about how philosophically he believes you owe it to your players to be I'm trying to think of the word that he used.
Composed.
Composed, yes. So try to be composed in tough moments. And so just start there, and you see two guys that are on opposite ends of the spectrum. And as we go along over these last, I don't know, year or so, the fact that the Giants' offense has been so bad, I think then weighs on that relationship, right? Because then it puts how much pressure does it put on the defense? Right? They basically can't make a mistake at times. Otherwise, I mean, they're scoring for a while. They're up to 13 points a game. They were at 11 points a game for a while, Bobby. 11 points a game. Like, I think the number, did you see the stat during the game where they said the Giants had the second most 3-and-outs of any defense in the NFL? Which is amazing if you think about it, because you have the second most 3-and-outs. You have they're up to 21st ranked defense. But how much? But that's what happens when your offense is really not holding up its end of the bargain. So I think that just added to it this year. The Xavier McKinney whole incident where basically Brian Daboll poo-pooed it, pushed it to the side. Wink Martindale, you saw he was hurt by that. He came out. He was like, no, no, no. I'm hurt by that. That's never happened to me before. He prides himself on having a very open meeting room and just overall program. And so it bothered him. And then Brian Daboll did not really take his side. And then who's breaking down the team after they win the first time for the first time in like a month? Xavier McKinney. Ultimate slap in the face.
Do you think it was self-serving by Wink Martindale to have that 6-minute like conversation on the Xavier McKinney thing, or do you think like who do you view as right in that?
What, the McKinney or Daboll? You talking about McKinney or Wink or Daboll and Wink?
Like, well, we can do Daboll and Wink, but like, it's how they handled that. Because as much as I was pissed off at McKinney and I agreed with everything Wink said, like, there was some self-serving motives to that.
Oh,
By going, I
absolutely.
mean, he could have let the media know he was displeased with that without talking about it for over 6 minutes, and really, now Xavier McKinney was being stupid, but really made Xavier McKinney look like a fool and then embarrassed him in front of everybody.
I think it probably was self-serving, but here's my take on it. And you had heard about, Wink is somehow going to get scapegoated here. And you're like, huh? And so that's something that's been bouncing around for a while. And you're like, okay. So I could see if that's the line of thinking why he's doing this. Hey, hold on one second here. I'm not just going to let myself get buried and be the scapegoat here. First of all, we've got a 32nd ranked offense over here. My defense, which hasn't been great, they have had good games. Like when the Giants win or are competitive, it's because of the defense, right? I
Right.
mean, Buffalo, who was
Yeah.
the
I mean,
game
obviously
after
the
that? That they won
defense.
the two Washington games, New England. The only game that they really did, that offensively maybe you could make the argument won the game was Arizona. And when they're competitive,
Yeah.
it's because of the defense. So I think it was sort of like, hey, I'm not just going to let myself get railroaded here. I'm going to come out and speak my mind. And he's a guy who speaks his mind anyway.
So I mean, had it's you said to start with like the way they deal with stuff, but like they're very kind of not. They're not a million interactions throughout a game on the way there. Like anytime Daboll's doing that on the sideline, but the majority it's against offensive players. Is
But
Dable
I
like
just think that's
MFing
his
these guys?
approach.
Is he
That's
MFing
his
the
approach
coaches?
all the time, though.
Okay, but is Dable like MFing Wink Martindale and the defensive staff behind closed doors? Like when they're in their their team film meetings, like the Sunday night, Monday morning, when the coaches all get together and go through the entire game film. Is he MFing then?
Yeah, I mean, I do believe. I mean, this is just my opinion on this. That he gets on Wink and he gets on him hard, and he's all over him, and that's part of what I'm saying. When you're on this guy and you're riding him hard, and you're crushing his defense and questioning the things he's doing, and then the guy's looking across to the other side, and he's like, your offense is 32nd in the league. We can't even move the ball, which is the way it was going for a while. And you're sitting here, MFing me and giving me a hard time. And I think that's how the tension builds, and that's why we're at where we're at.
Yeah, we're at a point where Wink Martindale like despises Brian Dable. Who
You
do you
don't
think?
want would you be upset if Wink left?
Yeah, because of the reasons why. Like I actually don't. I think there can be a better defensive coordinator brought in here. I like Wink, but if this is the reason why, because the way you're handling things behind the scenes, and this is you know with Dable, it's like it's always winning heals all things, but it's like okay, how good are you actually at running an organization, right, and not just coaching a team to play to its best. Yeah, if he loses like someone who he brought in, who's like a very like actually, I'm not going to use the word well respected like you guys. Someone who's had results as a defensive coordinator in the NFL. Uh yeah, I don't want him leaving. I like the way he calls the
You're
defense.
becoming one of us. You know that, right?
I think he changes week to week. No, actually break news. He changes week to week.
Oh, all right.
uh,
I'll see you later.
all right. No, he changes. I like Wink. I would be mad if Wink Martindale left as a defensive coordinator. Now I think there's good options to go out there. Like I don't think it would hamstring the Giants going forward. But yeah, like who that would be not a bad look. It's a bad thing that happened. Who is more to blame for this though? Wink or is Wink being a little sensitive, or is it Dable for not knowing how to handle it?
I'm sure it's both, but I mean, Wink has been around a long time. It hasn't really happened very often. It
Well,
seems
I
like a
mean,
special.
him and Harbaugh had a falling out after having like a number one defense in 3 or 4 seasons.
They did. We kind of, maybe, sort of. Harbaugh brought back his own guy. There was a purpose behind it. Yeah, they decided to part, but yeah, we didn't know at least of a rift like this, right? I mean, I don't at least. I didn't hear about that.
Obviously, this haven't seen anything like this in a while. I mean, even Judge and Garrett hated each other. You never got details out like this until it was until it was actually over. Um,
Yeah, I'm fighting through
so
stuff here, by the way.
so Wink is gone, right? Like it's kind of a foregone conclusion at this point, right?
I still do think there's a chance that they patch it up and they make it work. But if I had a bet, I wouldn't go in that direction.
Is Mike Kafka in danger of losing his job because there hasn't been much publicly, but like, is there rumblings of like issues with Daboll and Kafka too?
Mm, Not so much. I haven't really heard much on that end, to be honest with you. Now I have heard that Daboll's a hard guy to work for. Like that is something that's come out of it. I got you a text yesterday from somebody out of completely nowhere that said that, and I was like, oh, like you have to put it all in the file and look at the evidence and say, I guess it's possible. But here's the thing: let's say Wink is gone, okay, and McGahee also is gone, right? That one has probably run its course at this point.
Even
And
with
then
all the
Kafka,
respect he has.
and then Kafka, your Heinz, and then Kafka stays, right? Think about how ass backwards that is. All right, the two of their better units stayed. The worst of the three units by a wide margin. We're going to keep that intact. I mean, that'll be some optics. That's why I think John Mara will try really hard to keep Wink Martindale.
Yeah, I mean, I don't give a shit about it all. Like, I trust this offensive coaching staff to do well. We've seen them be able to create some explosives with DeVito. I do think they were hamstrung by how bad the offensive line was the first 5 or 6 games of the season.
For sure.
I do think they're and by Daniel Jones just playing his worst ball, and it's just a lot of issues there. The special teams. I mean, if there's one thing I
I
didn't
don't know.
like about
It's
Brian
funny.
Daboll,
Somehow the offense is still really good in a lot of people's minds, and
no, I
you're
think the
falling in
offensive
this.
coaching is really good. I don't think the
Well, the
offense
offensive
sucks.
coaching is really good, yet the quarterback played poorly. The offense is abysmal. It's been awful all year. I mean, it's
Well, it's a players' league.
semi-functionable now.
It's a players' league. We saw. I mean, the offense outproduced the defense last year when they made the playoffs.
I mean, they were both like middle
Yeah,
of the league
every
type units.
metric
They had their
favored
ups
the
and downs.
offense.
I don't think either of them were great units.
No, but I mean the offense had David Sills starting for it, and Richie James, who can't even play on the worst wide receiver unit in the league, and the Chiefs right now.
I mean, the Giants had who was their number two
Okay,
cornerback?
who do
What's
you
his name?
so
The
after
veteran from Washington. What's his name? Why am I drawing a blank?
what are you talking about?
Who is the
Fabian
Giants
Moreau.
starting cornerback this year? Fabian Moreau.
He's I mean he's actually played in the NFL.
Yeah, but I
But
mean, it's
anyways,
not a starter.
anyways
No,
we're not. But
actually, it might be.
But here's the thing: Wink Martindale's not leaving because of performance, right? He's leaving because they hate each other, right? So that's different, right? Like I don't think anyone thinks, oh, that Daboll's not wants to fire. Like, did Daboll want to fire Wink for performance, or is this just they can't stand each other and decided to part ways?
Yeah, it would be the latter.
Yeah, like if Wink didn't care about all the yelling and stuff, and kind of even if he didn't like it, dealt with it and wasn't leaking stuff out to the Jay Glazer. Like I don't know if I don't maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't think that Daboll would fire him. And then McGahee, there's one thing
It's
everything
funny
that
you think it all is coming from Wink. There's definitely people
well,
that think
why
it's coming
wouldn't
from
it
the
be
other
coming?
side,
Why would it be coming from Daboll?
greasing the skids to get rid of a defensive coordinator that people would probably want to keep.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems like it's
You
coming
can't
from
you
Wink.
can't just with no context at the end of the season be like,
Then why would Dable be
we're
trying
getting
to do
rid of
the
Wink.
PR job afterwards?
What's that?
Dable was working PR afterwards.
Fair. I don't. I look. None
And
of it makes
we're here,
sense.
and the stuff from the media is coming as like the negative parts of Dable and Patriot Way and yelling and cussing and stuff like that. You don't hear like, oh, you don't hear that Daboll can't stand Wink because he runs too much man coverage and gets beat by screens consistently. Like, we haven't heard any of that come out.
Because I don't think it's a schematic thing. I think it's more a personality thing.
I agree, and that's the stuff you're hearing is all the issues of Daboll's personality.
But I think it works both. I think it is. I do think it works both ways. I mean, I don't think Daboll and Wink. Daboll thinks that highly of Wink as a person right now either.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he doesn't. McGahee is the one thing. Nobody criticizes anything a head coach and GM do in their first 30 days. Keeping McGahee was the one thing I couldn't stand. It's like that interview process was horrible. So McGahee should be gone. Listening to his pressers make me sick.
By the way, their special teams have not been bad for most of this year, second half of this year, especially after an awful start.
I'm not doing this. Stop. Well, here's the real test. Bobby Johnson. That's a Brian Daboll guy. Like, no one's asking for Shea Tierney to be gone. Bobby Johnson is his guy. This offensive line, like, I hate criticizing position coaches because you really don't know unless you're in the building. But there's just been too much of a track record of not being able to develop talent. And you see what Tyree Phillips isn't great, but you saw like actual technique improvements once he came back. There's Evan Neal's been an issue. John Michael Schmitz, I haven't seen anything new added to John Michael Schmitz, even though he's been a little up and down, had some good moments, had some bad moments. Like, outside of Andrew Thomas, there's been no development, and Thomas was kind of all on his own doing. Like, is Bobby Johnson going to be here in 2024? Is there any rifts there, even though the fact that they are friendly?
Yeah, I do think that the Giants are not happy with the development of the offensive line. I do think that exists. When you talk to people in the building, they realize the development there has not been good enough and pretty consistent. So I would not be surprised if that one went in that direction for that reason. Now, again, it'll be an interesting test because that's one of Daboll's guys, right? That's one of the guys that him and Shane brought in and brought with them from Buffalo. But I do not think that it would be something that they would be shy about moving on from, to be honest with you. Like, right. Daboll comes from, remember, and we talk about this, he comes from that Belichick tree. When there's a coach that Belichick doesn't think is good enough, he'll get off that coach.
Yeah, which is always a good test for a coaching staff, is the guys that you are friends and do have relationships with. When they're not performing, can you do it? And that's
right.
I think
but
that's
this one is kind of easy to just say, hey, come on, it hasn't worked out. We haven't been able to develop these guys. There's really no argument for Bobby Johnson if you say that, right?
No, I agree, but it's hard to fire your friends. That's just the nature of the business, and that's why a lot of, like, Bobby Johnson will probably get an O-line coach job somewhere else because he's friends with this coaching staff that has a new head coach. What are the thoughts on Evan Neal?
Daboll will get input from Mara. He'll get input from Shane, I'm sure, on these kind of things. I mean, him and Shane are super tight. They do everything together. So every decision is really a joint decision from those two. But ultimately, when you do make moves on your coaching staff, the final decision almost always comes down to the head coach. And if he really wants to put his foot down, he can. Would he do it for Bobby Johnson in this case? That's hard to imagine because the track record is just not good enough.
Right. What are the thoughts on Evan Neal in the building? Because the injury is like, it's hard to just slate him in at right tackle again.
No, I agree. I spoke to people. I guess it was the game he got injured. They thought he played really well, actually. The game that he got injured.
There's been technical improvements, but that's
3 weeks back. And I asked it specifically, and Joe Shane was asked this, and he kind of gave the same answer that I got from a source off the record previously about, hey, do you guys actually want to keep him out there? You think ultimately his future would be a guard? And the answer was that, you know what? I think we do think he's a tackle. Now, he has to play better. We've seen some good things from him. We just haven't seen it consistently enough. It hasn't been good enough. But it seems like ultimately they're going to try to make it work at right tackle. Now, that doesn't mean you don't go out there and at least bring someone else in. Like, you can't go into next season with the same, tackle situation that they have right now. You just absolutely can't. Personally, if it was me, I would go out and get my number one offseason acquisition, free agency. I need a proven right tackle, a guy that I know can play and I could put in there and I have a solid right tackle. Then once you have that and Andrew Thomas and you hope John Michael Schmidt's a quality center, you could fill in the guards from there. Anything else to me is too risky. Drafting a guy, too risky at this point for this team. They can't afford to have a rookie in there and have his ups and downs again. They need to have a proven right tackle.
Yeah, I mean, I really like the guy for Sean out of Penn State, but I also think I'd want to invest in some other places and have some hope. But I think depth, like I think that's where they've screwed up the most before the season when everything was fine and dandy. Was like I hated that was the one thing from the press conference I hated from Joe Shane was the idea of the offensive line. They got unlucky. They cut their swing tackle who left for Matt Parrott to be the swing tackle, and then when they got put in that situation, they put their backup guard in there, who hasn't developed. You're playing at center.
It was interesting accounting by Shane because it's like that we're on our fifth tackle. Well, that's because you wouldn't play your third was unplayable. You didn't think you could play him in Matt Parrott, and your fourth you decided to cut. So yeah, of course you're on your fifth.
Yeah, and I mean, and then like their plan at center was their biggest issue of the offseason. They let Gates walk. I mean, Gates got some money, so I understand that. Feliciano only got $2.5 million. Like not bringing him back as depth. And you got lucky that I mean, what happens if the Bears take JMS at 56, which when they traded up, we all thought that they were going to do. What is your plan there? Get a center in the third round because they admitted in some of their post draft videos that they would have taken Jalen Hyatt at that spot. I know they cross-chained Ben Bredesen, but it's just been a lack of one going after depth and having a plan there. And I actually think Ben Bredesen is low key should be one of their main priorities of keeping this offseason, right? And it's not even just to be a starter. Like even if you have different starters, I think keeping Ben Bredesen as a backup at worst needs to be one of your main priorities. So this offensive line obviously has been an issue. And even if Evan Neal works out and Thomas has injury issues, which I know we've went 25 minutes without getting to the quarterbacks, but since we're talking about offensive line and stuff, and this leads into it, what do you think and who is to blame for the way they've handled injuries? Andrew Thomas played basically a full game through a hamstring. If it wasn't a blowout, he would have played the full game. And again, he missed 7 games. He's currently playing on an MCL sprain, which he only missed 2 series for. Graham Gano kicked on an injury that they all knew about, and he needed. They ended up shutting him down 2 days later. Daniel Jones went, back and played on a torn ACL, the whole neck thing on that. Who is to blame for this mishandling of injuries, specifically with their best players in reality, or their most important ones?
This is always one of the most complicated ones because it's really hard to put your finger on these kind of things and say who's ultimately responsible. Now, the head coach, the general manager, they're involved. Ronnie Barnes, he's the head of medical. He's involved. You have to look at it and say all these people together share some of the blame. Now, it's hard to pinpoint who deserves more blame than somebody else. Like, what I do think is they need to reconsider how they approach the summer. Because you were there. It was country club training camp, right? I mean, Nobody practiced. Nobody was on the field. Light practices. Nobody did anything. And look, I'm not going to sit here and second guess after the fact because I was like, I'm a big believer in just get to the season healthy. That's the most important thing. But we saw here, it then led to injury after injury after injury. So they have to readdress that and figure out if that was just some of it was luck, some of the way they handled injuries, or it's because of the way they handled the summer and you need that work so you don't get injured during the season. But it's really hard to put your finger on. We've been doing this for 8 to 10 years, Bobby, and we're like, why do the Giants have so many injuries? And we look and there's still some of the same people there, but how much of it? I do believe some of it is bad luck, right? You can't do anything about a guy tearing his Achilles or tearing his knee. Sometimes like that's just going to happen, or of a guy landing on a play, offensive lineman, just someone rolling into his leg.
Right.
Like some of these things are uncontrollable. Now, the Andrew Thomas hamstring injury is not uncontrollable. You have to look at Brian Daboll in game there and say, why was Andrew Thomas playing the rest of that game when he was hurt that badly? And then why was he coming back obviously too early? Because when he tried to come back in practice, that's when he basically suffered a second injury. It was basically two separate injuries, essentially, right? You basically have the first 4 games, and then when he came back, he actually told me at one point it was a 4 to 6 week injury for like a skill position player, but because he was an offensive lineman, they thought he could be back earlier. Comes back, tries to practice, hurts it again, aggravates it at that point, and now it's like a second injury. So now you have another 4 weeks out. So
that's one of those things
a
where I
lot
don't
of
know.
blame to pass around.
Yeah, and I actually don't put it mostly on the head coach. Like I put it on whoever. Like the head coach is dealing with the information that's given to him. Like, is this guy cleared? Is this guy can play? Yes or no? But again, it's one of those things that it's just.
But when you're down 30.
No,
something
that
points,
I agree with. But like Thomas right now,
it probably benefited them to not play Thomas at that point.
I agree. But it's like what was the should he have come in like immediately? Like who's clearing him to come in immediately after that? Like, and the Graham Gano situation. Like, I know everyone got mad at Brian Daboll for not going for it on fourth in the Jets game, but in my mind, if a kicker is clear to play, you have to be able to know that the kicker is like he can kick the ball, and he made kicks earlier in the game. And then like Andrew Thomas currently, I actually look at the Andrew Thomas currently more than the hamstring. Like he's playing on an MCL sprain. Like, why is that happening? Who is clearing that to happen, and who's making that decision? Like, who's allowing these guys to kind of play against their best interests? 30 minutes. We set a record without talking about Daniel Jones. Proud of us. I know, right? So Joe Schoen answered it basically where you could pick what you want to think on that, right? Like where Daniel Jones is the starter. And then when asked about changing a QB, I actually thought he was really smart until someone finally asked him about the first round. Like, yeah, well, we're going to have to do something at quarterback. Tyler Odd's a free agent. We don't know when, like, yeah, of course. And then I think Rock asked him, like, what about the first round? He said best player available. So nobody from that press conference can say that they are not looking at that. Here's the thing. It would have been hard to pass on a QB with a top 2 pick. What happens if they have the 5th or 6th pick? Because one is the trade up. Do you trade the guy who's QB3, even if you recognize him? Because we know that Mara is not happy with the idea of paying Daniel Jones and then essentially moving off of him 1 year after.
First of all, I don't view that as big a problem for John Mara. Like if they had the number 1 or 2 pick, they were going to move off Daniel Jones.
I agree, but what about now?
Zero doubt. The question now is, and if Joe Schoen thinks that they have a guy that is going to be a future star quarterback, I believe that ownership will also sign off on that one as well, right? All right, let's see what happens, right? We'll see what happens this year because Daniel Jones is basically going to be on the roster this year, right? $35.5 million off of ACL tear. But let's see what happens this year, especially if they draft 7th. It's probably going to be a guy who you could sit to start their career. If Daniel Jones plays great, that's a great problem to have. You deal with that, right, at the time. The rookie quarterback, still cheap. So the question is there another guy out there? Now, remember, Josh Allen was the 3rd quarterback picked.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is there were people, he was in the running also for a lot of teams with the number 1 pick. I don't know if that guy exists this year. Maybe I talked to some people the other day. They told me they weren't really sure about Jalen Daniels, the guy from LSU. They weren't that high on Penix. Bo Nix, they thought was probably better than Penix, but neither of them kind of in that top 10 kind of range. So it's a lot easier to not do that if you're, picking 7th to not go in the direction of the quarterback, just because is it really a good move? Is there another guy that's really at that level? And that's really what Joe Schoen and his group will have to come up with, because it's doubtful. Let's say they're picking 7th, that a talent like Josh Allen is actually sitting there at 7.
Yeah, and I listen, I've never been like you need the first pick in the draft to get quarterback right. You look, part of why even though you look at now in the Daniel Jones contract in hindsight was a mistake, part of the reason why I was so on board with it in the moment was like, well, look at all the best young QBs in the NFL and look at those QB situations when they were drafted. Almost all of those teams were paying a quarterback the year of or the year before. Um, and besides Joe Burrow, really none of them were a top 2 pick. When you look at the guys
Yeah.
who are like
I
bona
don't really
fide.
mind the Daniel Jones situation. It's fine. You have one more year with him, right? That's why you structure the contract the way you did, because that was in the range of outcomes.
The
And
Jones,
now it's to
yeah,
the point where the biggest concern for me with Daniel Jones, we could still sit here and argue of how good he is and how good he isn't, but it's, do you really want to build your team around a quarterback who has that injury history right now? And the
yeah.
answer to me is an easy no, right? It has to be. 2 neck injuries and a torn ACL. How could you be confident building your team around that right now? And so I don't see Joe Schoen, who I consider pretty bright, looking at that and saying, I'm going to build my team around Daniel Jones 100%. Like,
And
how could you do that with a straight face?
yeah, I've been someone who's like Daniel Jones more than most, and the injuries one, but more so just the play on the field when he was on the field this year. Really, I'm at the point where I just wanted a different
It's funny
quarterback
because you'll
before the
make the
injury.
offensive line excuse for the coaches, but you run for the quarterback.
Well, I think quarterback is part of the excuse for the coaches. Daniel Jones was missed. They asked him to do more than what they did last year. There was open guys, and he was not taking those throws. And there's, I mean, even DeVito, who I'm not in on the DeVito hype, but like a lot of people, uh, like he's taking throws that Jones was passing up.
I agree, but it's very difficult to operate consistently. I agree he played poorly, but it's very difficult to operate consistently. The offensive line, by the way, now is in way better shape think about it, than it was when Daniel Jones was playing. I mean,
Ag-
light
ag-
years ahead. That's
Agreed.
that's where so he was in a really tough spot. It was a really tough spot for anyone to succeed consistently, and I think it wore on him, and we saw him play poorly. But a big part of that was that line, without Andrew Thomas, without John Michael Schmidt, at that point was as bad as we've ever seen it, Bobby.
Agreed, and I've broken that down, but there also was like that Seattle game before the sacks started rolling in. I mean that is top 3 worst games he's put together, and that
He
was really
played poorly.
that was a really decider of there. And there was stuff within the week 1 Dallas game where it's like, hey, there is times where you just missed open shit, and then even coming back from that Raiders game, like
Yeah.
I mean he
But there
just
was
was
clearly a
missing.
lack of confidence in the line. Like, that was, to me, the biggest problem
But to me,
going on
that's
there.
even more of an issue. It's like we kind of need to restart and have someone who's got some of the young gunslinger mentality. And hey, I'm
Right.
not afraid that DJ at one point had in his career and was kind of beaten out to him, and now some of the other issues. So, my question is just what happens when you're drafting 6 and you might have to trade up to 4 to get the guy that you want. If it's Jaden Daniels, like is there going to be that urgency to do it? Right. My question is not if there's a guy worth it, but if you do view a guy that's worth it, are they going to pull it if it's not a top 2 pick? Um,
I
and
do
that's
think
where
they would.
okay,
I
all
do.
right, that's good
I
to
do.
know.
I think, knowing Joe Schoen, and remember, Buffalo traded up twice to get Josh Allen, actually, if I remember correctly. I think they were at 21. They traded up twice to
Yes,
get
they did.
to 7 or 8. What was it? I think it's 7,
I agree.
if I
My
remember
question is
correctly. I
not
think
whether
7.
Joe Shane is there enough pressure to be like, hey, we just need to like. I mean, we know Mara's
Well,
not happy for a bunch of reasons. Another one is the idea of that you just paid this quarterback. You essentially picked your quarterback now, and like, no, we going to say all the things that you just said about the offensive line, receiver, and shit like that.
but they picked their quarterback knowing that there was a potential of it not working. Like,
Yeah, but not after year one. The
ju-
plan was never after year one.
well, yes, but of course, the injury is basically the biggest thing, right? That's the biggest thing right now. So
No,
he
I actually
tore
think
his
the
knee.
play is the biggest thing because if he was playing great and he got injured, it's like okay, like that sucks. Like let's
But
get a
that's
better
silly. So
backup.
you basically disregard the what would they play 19 games a year before, and you're putting all you're out because of the 5 games to start the season. You can't count the 6 he barely played. So you're like, forget the 19 games, it's the 5 games I'm out on.
No, what I'm saying, if he was playing great and he got injured, I wouldn't be looking to draft a quarterback in the first round.
I just think with the injury history, like you're building a team. When you look at this team, Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll are going to be putting their professional fate at the hands, right, of the quarterback, essentially. So, do you really want to put your professional career at stake with a quarterback who had 2 neck injuries now and then is coming off a torn ACL? It seems to me pretty obvious. We need to get a quarterback that we can build around and that first of all, it'll buy them extra time probably too on top of that. So to me, it makes so much sense. Hey, they have to sell it to ownership, yes. I think ownership, you can convince them that if it's the right move. John Mara, hem and haw. He'll always, have that face and be upset. But if it's the right move, they will be willing to go in that direction. Now, it was a lot more difficult when it was Eli Manning and he won 2 Super Bowls and the guys at the top were all connected to him. Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll are not connected to Daniel Jones, right? They're not the one. They are in a way, but they're not the ones who drafted him. They're not the ones who brought him in originally. They did resign him. I get it. So they are connected to him. I shouldn't say that, but not to the degree of this is 100% our guy. Like, hey, we thought it could work. He got injured. Now we need to go get a guy we can build around and win a Super Bowl with, because they're so far from winning a Super Bowl. How far is their roster from the Eagles, from the Cowboys, from even the Detroit Lions right now?
I agree, and I'm a big anti just picking a quarterback to take one, right? So if they're picking 6 and they draft like a top offensive lineman, wide receiver, pass rusher, I'm okay with that, as long as, obviously I'll have my opinions when I actually look at the quarterbacks, but like, I don't believe in just taking one to take one. Like, so like if they had a top 2 pick and they didn't take a quarterback, yeah, I'd be pissed. So I'll just ask you this, and then we'll finish off with some Saquon stuff. Let's just say they have the 6th pick. Would you think they would take a quarterback or a different position? I'll even throw in the second round too. Would they be taking a quarterback in the top 2 rounds?
6th pick, no trade.
Well, like, trade could be an option too, but like, do you like, season ends, they have the 6th pick. Would you be betting on them taking a quarterback or not?
Who's picking 1 and 2?
Bears pick 1, and
the Cardinals will be interesting.
Bears pick 1, and the Patriots trade up 1 spot for the 2nd pick, and they're taking a quarterback.
Yeah, so you're not getting either of the top 2 guys, then you're saying.
No.
So it's either eliminating the quarterback number 3. I think a second round quarterback is most.
Or even say, hey, the Cardinals have 2,
or back end of the first round, maybe.
Yeah, maybe
trade up into the back end.
Yeah, I'd be interesting to see if a team that's not, let's say the Bears end up with the top 2 picks, would the Giants be willing to trade all the way up to 2, which would be the really fascinating thing.
The Bears they're drafting a quarterback.
But they have 2 picks with the Panthers pick. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, you're saying the Bears get 1 too?
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't seem likely, but yeah, I think if one of those teams in the top 2 is a team that's going to trade out, then that becomes a possibility. Otherwise, there's probably not that guy that's just going to blow them away that they feel like they have to get at all costs. I really don't think that guy. And this is basic. I'm basing this off very initial conversations with people that I've talked to, and I'm not even talking to people in the Giants organization, people that I know that have seen these quarterbacks play, that I asked recently. Like, I just started asking people about the other draft quarterbacks, and the general consensus was they didn't view them as really high, like top 5 type picks. I didn't really get on Daniels. I really didn't get into that one, so I don't really know on that. But Nix and Penix, the consensus to me was, yeah, they're probably not that level of prospect.
Right.
I don't know what you think of them. You have any opinion on the quarterbacks?
No, I mean, I do that stuff after the season. In season, I'm watching the Giants. The Giants obviously had that whole long battle with Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley ends up folding and showing up in the camp for no incentives, essentially. Besides legacy, which we know he is very important to him. Why was Saquon not available? I'm not saying trade it because I didn't who just wants to trade him for shit and hates the running back position. Why was he not available? But guys like Leonard Williams were.
Saquon, I believe, was not available because the product on the field, which was pretty embarrassing at the time, would have been untenable if you took Saquon out of that mix. And we're talking about offensively. Like there was
The 32nd ranked
concern.
offense you're talking about?
Yes, I'm talking about the 32nd ranked offense that was scoring 12 points a game might have had trouble scoring points. That was kind of the concern at the time. And so I do think that they just didn't want to roll out their product. And also, Bobby, what is realistic to get for Saquon Barkley?
Yeah, but they didn't even like entertain. They didn't even barter. Like if you asked a week before the Leonard Williams
They
trade, which I broke,
you're
what is realistic for Leonard Williams? No one in there. If you said second and a fifth, people would have said you're an insane fan. Take your fan glasses off.
but I think with Saquon, you have a franchise tag to use on him, which is reasonable, which isn't crazy when they have a lot of money under the cap next year. And B, a second round pick is basically, what you can get a comp pick essentially back. So it's not unless it was it would have to be a trade like that. But I don't think they thought that was a realistic return for him. I really don't. So that's why I think they were able to easily just say, you know what, we're going to say he's not available. We don't want we don't want to become, our owner would have to sit there through another what at the time what 8-9 games with an offense that is literally scoring 6 points a game. That would have then put a lot more pressure on Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll. So that to me is why it didn't happen.
Are they cutthroat enough to franchise tag him again? And is he going to be willing to take a team friendly deal because legacy and all that stuff is important? And it doesn't seem like that big contract's coming, especially after the way this season has went.
Yes, I do think Joe Schoen in particular is cutthroat enough to use it again if he has to. He knows he knows it's an option. They intentionally did not give that to him in their negotiations, right? That's the one thing he could have won and fought for. The Giants still wouldn't give that to him. So I think they always wanted that option out there because they look at it as a realistic option. And you know what? Let's be honest, Bobby. Is it a bad deal for Saquon at this point?
The tag?
Yeah.
Essentially, he doesn't want it, is what it comes down to, though. He wants to finish as a Giant. He wants to be part of Giants media going forward. He wants to be in the New York. Like, we all know these things about Saquon
What can he
Barkley.
get on the open market at this point, though?
But what can he, I'm saying, will he be willing to take like a team friendly deal that guarantees 2 years, but not the average annual value that he wants?
As the pressure keeps building and the options dwindle down, I think in the end, he'll just have to give in a little bit and take the best offer. And we'll see him with like 2 years guaranteed from the Giants. And this is just my best guess at this point, right? But, essentially, what is it? $12 million is the franchise tag.
Yeah.
So like 2 years. So essentially, whatever the deal says, it could be like 3 years, 40 million. I don't even know, I'm making up a number, but it's essentially 2 years, 24 million, 25 million guaranteed.
Which is crazy. I don't even know. The Giants didn't even offer that last year, which would be crazy if they offered it this year. At least guaranteed.
This year, the franchise tag is a little higher, though. So that does work in Saquon's favor. So he's already guaranteed 12, right? So
right.
the starting point is 12. Like that, he's guaranteed that. So what are you willing to guarantee him for the next year? 8, 9 million? So 20, 21, 22. You know that's what I'm saying. I could see him end up taking something like that.
Right.
2 years, 20 maybe is probably more realistic.
We've hit basically everything, right? We talk about DJ, offensive line, coaching staff. And it's kind of crazy after 2 wins. It just this bye week feels pretty hectic. That's before players go on sightseeing tours or whatever. Actually, that's my last question. The only player I haven't gotten a read on, like what's going to happen with him on the future is Xavier McKinney, right? And he's been at the center of this Daboll Wink thing. Do they want to bring him back? Is it reasonable that he wants to be back and will be back, or is he just like dead set on the getting to the open market and getting out of here? Like, do you have any read of how that ends? Because that's the one thing I haven't gotten to get any type of read on.
Well, first of all, let me say this: Xavier McKinney, I think, is a really good player. But the other thing is, he's going to want a lot of money, and the Giants. I think I've already made that pretty clear. They're not going to pay him, top safety money. He really hasn't played as a top safety consistently for any extended period of time.
And it's not a position that just garner like the best safety in free agency gets big money. Sometimes those guys sit and wait. Unless you're, Jesse Bates who is a significantly better player, is the only one who got paid last year.
So it's going to be tough, but I think Xavier McKinney wants way more than the Giants are going to be willing to pay at that position, and I think that's why. I mean, Joe Schoen came out basically and said before the season, like, we'll worry about that after the year. We're not going to try and re-sign him now.
So they would use the tag on Saquon before McKinney.
Is Wink back?
No.
So I think that increases the chances that McKinney's back.
Which is if you bring in like a Leslie Frazier, or Patrick Graham could even be available, which is crazy to think about that because he was originally their defensive coordinator. That's where McKinney becomes a lot more valuable as a player in those types of systems. So
still, that's a lot of money. I'm not sure the Giants really want to invest that money at that position.
Yeah, but the interest is what will the open market think of? Again, McKinney, a good player, but I don't know if any team's going to go out there breaking the bank for Xavier McKinney, who's, just got his first interception in 2 years.
He's got one of the best agents in the business, David Mulligetta, who has done an exceptional job of getting safeties paid. And I'm just saying this: Xavier McKinney hits the open market, he's going to get paid. Somebody's going to pay him. He's going to get paid.
Yeah, so that right now that would sound like he's not with the Giants, which again I've had a hard time getting a read on. So yeah,
you would really like him to be part of that because Dexter, Kayvon,
I also don't think the Giants are in the spot of
Banks and McKinney. Like, that's one player at each level that I would really like. That if you had that's like a really good core. Losing McKinney would hurt.
Yeah, and I also think the Giants are not talented enough to let good drafted players walk, and that's they just shouldn't be in that situation, especially after trading Leonard Williams and all that's happened. So, they didn't re-sign any. They hadn't re-signed any drafted players besides Shep in like 8 years until last year, where they re-signed Jones, Dex, Thomas, Slayton, Ocean Zimenez. I know. I'm a Ben Whitley fan by the way now. So he's my new guy to just randomly like. Boogie Basham, by the way, healthy scratch. Like, that's kind of crazy.
He has not been good. I don't know if when you've watched tape, he's not. Yeah.
No, but Jahad Ward hasn't been good besides the Patriots game, and you would think that
my
maybe
point
they would
is
give him those snaps.
Oh no, Boogie Basham has not earned more snaps, man. Sorry, there's no world that in my opinion, he's earned more snaps. And everybody, Joe Schoen master season. The Boogie Basham and Isaiah Simmons trades, they don't look so good anymore.
The Simmons ones, I don't mind. It's a 7th round pick for someone like you're probably not going to get someone who has his role as a 7th rounder. The Basham,
they're not these like big steals. They're like nothing. Burners.
Well, no. Well, thankfully, the one good thing about the Giants losing this season is that the reaction to every move isn't masterclass. It's like sometimes moves aren't perfect, and sometimes even if they aren't bad moves, they're not masterclasses either.
I do like the Simmons move. I'm just sitting here looking in retrospect. Like, there's so little.
Oh, I mean, my Isaiah Simmons film breakdown was our most viewed video we've ever had. Like, there was obviously my Isaiah Simmons film breakdown video, which again was a lot of criticizing, was I think our most viewed video in the last 2 years, which is which I get. I mean, a lot of people wanted him in that draft, uh, so I do understand it. But yeah,
Sometimes name value exceeds actual real life value.
yeah. But I will say some of his biggest warts hadn't showed up because of the role until this Patriots game where he missed like 3 tackles, especially on third downs. Besides the Commanders game where he missed a sack. All right, that's an interview. We can find you. Where can
It's
people
an
find
interview
you?
on social media at Jordan Raanan,
Is
at
the
Jordan Raanan ESPN.
how do you spell? Is it the Raanan or is it Ranaaan?
Raanan. The two A's are at the front. Two A's at the front. And it's not Raanan Nuts. It's Raanan.
Yeah, I
Jordan
finally
Raanan,
got got.
ESPN.
5 years. I finally got got. But no excuses. I was at the airport traveling. All right.
That's an excuse. You just gave
No,
an excuse.
no. I'm
No,
saying
it's absolutely it's an excuse.
no
It's an excuse.
excuses. But I could use an excuse that I was at the airport traveling and it was very early in the morning. But no excuses. Um, I saw a very funny meme that was like anytime Brian Daboll gets asked a hard question, and it's like self-deprecating joke about being fat, which is basically every time. Maybe like say besides being fat, what is some
How
of the issues?
awkward? How awkward was the joke after the game? Like about the that was the pizza one. How awkward was that?
It wasn't awkward. Actually, I thought it was like a pretty good like sidestep, but as we all know that there is.
Really, man, I thought it was super awkward. If you watch him, he's like basically waiting for someone to ask the question. He's like hugging the podium. He
Oh, they
threw
had
out
that
the
plan.
pizza joke.
Adore had like the exact same. I mean, they obviously pre-planned. Like they talked about it um, before anyone got to talk to the media. I'm pretty sure they talked with the players with it too. All right, the Jordan Raanan interview is not over. We came back on for 2 minutes, so we're going to go back to that. But first, can you believe we're this deep into the NFL season? We're already at the Giants bye week. We got to make every second count, people. With DraftKings Sportsbook, you can make the most out of every game day. Bet on your favorite teams for a shot at winning big bucks. New customers can score 150 instantly and bonus bets for betting 5 on any matchup. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code WORLD. New customers can get 150 and instantly in bonus bets for betting just $5 on football. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code WORLD. The crown is yours. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In West Virginia, visit www.1800gambler.net. Please play responsibly. In Connecticut, help if there's a bill for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. On behalf of Blue Hill Casino Resort, Kansas, must be 21 or older in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details and state-specific responsible gambling resources. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply. Bonus bets expire on 168 hours after issuance. Terms at sportsbook.draftkings.com/football terms. You'll be glad you did. And here's Jordan Raanan again. All right, we were talking post-show and we forgot something. So I got good seats for this game thanks to SeatGeek promo code Giants because both teams sucked. And I was maybe like one of 3 people who was super invested in the Joe Judge returning aspect of this. Maybe because that's like this is the first head coach where I covered his entire tenure. And I see you talking to him, and I FaceTime you twice and text you, like, answer the phone. I want to say what's up to Judge. And you didn't answer.
But how do I know you're a wild card? How do I know?
What am I going to do? What am I
go?
going to do? Start cussing him out and say, how'd you QB? You're in the spot where the QB sneak happened. No, I have respect for Judge. I have respect for Judge.
How do I know
have
that?
Respect for me.
How do I know that?
Because we've talked. You know that one, I have respect for Judge, despite the fact I want him fired, and the judges have respect for me.
How do I know you're not 6 cocktails deep and just want to do one of your funny little bits?
I want to do that to Judge.
But how do I know that?
Because
how do I know that in the moment? Of course, you just
because when
decline,
I am
decline.
No, you should have absolutely answered that. It would have put a smile on his. I've interacted with Judge, and I mean, Patrick Graham changed his vanity.
Who's going to trust Bobby to behave themselves when you have no control over the situation, which is me and right there? Who's going to trust you in that situation?
I think we'll put up a poll that, like, what do you think Bobby would have done something stupid in that situation?
Of course they do. It's resounding yes.
No. So I just want to remember that, because now the Tony Award voting it is changing, where it is I am 25% of the vote, Justin's 25% of the vote, Danny's 25%, and then the listeners are the other 25%. So just wanted that out there. All right, that's Jordan Raanan of ESPN, two A's at the end.
Decline.
All right, thanks again, Jordan Raanan. Uh, so we're off until Monday. We'll or maybe Tuesday. We'll see when we're back. We'll have a mailbag out. Check out the OLine report and film review. We'll have a mock draft video out next week annually. We do it for the during the bye week. I hope you guys are looking forward to that. We're gonna make the most out of this time before the Giants are back for a Monday Night Football game against the Panthers. We truly do appreciate you guys all. Until then, let's go Big Blue.